Four kids were trapped in the middle of the Amazon jungle for 40 days with no food, no shelter, no grown-up, and somehow all of them survived. But this story didn't just start in the jungle, it started in a tiny indigenous village inside the Amazon rainforest of Colombia. But before we continue with the story, if my story interests you, please subscribe to my channel and on your notifications so that you don't miss any of my daily posts. So let's get into the story. So there's this woman, her name is Magdalena. She's living with her husband, Manuel. But Manuel isn't a safe, effective husband. He's known for being physically and verbally abusive, being involved in very illegal activity, and not treating Magdalena as a priority, which is really worrisome because it is not just Magdalena that is being treated like this, but also her children. So they have four kids together. Leslie is 11, Solani is 9, Tian is 4, and little Christine is just 11 months old. But the two oldest, Leslie and Solani, are from Magdalena's previous marriage, which made Manuel their stepfather. But because Manuel is not a good man and has really bad influences, the safety of their family and the town has been worsening every single day, so much so that he's been receiving dangerous threats. So he decided, okay, let me flee my village, leaving my wife and kids behind so that I don't die, which is like shocking because how selfish can you possibly just leave your family to fend for themselves? And so Magdalena had no other choice but to follow Manuel because the rebel group that was causing all of this violence in the town was also recruiting children. And that is a huge no. So she began begging every day for one of the soldiers in her town to fly her and the children on a plane that they can be reunited in a neighboring city with Manuel. And out of pure luck, one of the flights got cancelled. So Magdalena, her four children and two pilots boarded a small aging plane, but from the start, everything felt wrong. A massive rainstorm was directly ahead of them, and the aircraft itself was in terrible condition. The engine, wings, and blade were barely functional. Even turning it on was considered risky. So when the plane started moving, the muddy and rough ground made the wings shake hard. The blade struck the ground before the aircraft finally lifted into the air. Somehow, they were airborne. At first, everything seemed okay. The storm passed, the sky cleared, and then the engine stopped working. The pilot grabbed the radio and calls air traffic control, yelling, Mayday, Mayday, 28.03. I'm operating at low power. I'm going to hit the water. A few seconds later, the airplane suddenly turned sharply to the right and dove nose first at over 100 miles per hour, crashing straight into the ground. Half of the plane bent and collapsed on impact. So there was this sound of metal breaking and debris flying everywhere. Then everything went silent. Leslie opens her eye after blacking out from the impact and she's terrified and confused, yelling for her mom. But as she lifted her head to look around, all she saw were the unalive bodies of the two pilots in horrific condition. They immediately died on impact, and all I can hope is that they felt no pain. And then a few seconds later, Magdalena and all the kids wake up completely disoriented, but still alive, except something felt off. Like Magdalena was feeling really sleepy and warm, which is a dangerous sign. So she's looking around, like looking at her keys, looking at the horrifying scene, and then she looked at herself. Magdalena's whole body is drenched in blood, though she didn't fully understand why. So Leslie quickly fumbles through their bag and grabs a diaper, and then she reaches over to her mom and applies pressure, covering a gashing wound that Magdalena didn't even know she had. But unfortunately, that didn't help for very long because just 4 days after the crash, Magdalena was getting so bad that she knew she was going to die. So rather than holding her children back, she told Leslie, stay alive and get out of here. Leave me. And that's exactly what she did. Their mom passed away, and over the next few days, between keeping her siblings alive, keeping herself alive, Leslie took all of the skills that she learned as a little girl from her indigenous tribe and she put them to use. Despite the pain, hunger, and insult, she led her three younger siblings while carrying her 11 months older sister in her arms. Each day, they walked more than 15 miles, moving towards the sun and following the river. She would hunt for edible berries and fruits that were really high in nutrients and make sure that they were not poisonous. She would also mix water and cassava flour that was really high in protein and feed it to her siblings. And for the baby, she would grab a leaf, form it into funnel, and use it as makeshift baby bottle so that it can go straight into her mouth. Like this little girl is 11 years old and she is so knowledgeable of her home and forest that she is using all the resources to help them all her life. So by this point, it's been almost 16 days since the plane crashed and Leslie is on high alert because every few days she would see and hear people out in the distance. But instead of yelling, we are here, she would go and hide in the trees. And if you are wondering why doesn't she want to be rescued? Well, I suggest you think about it. Like her mom and stepfather ran away from the village because of rebels who were threatening to hurt them. So because of this, she doesn't trust anyone, even if it means staying in the jungle a little longer. She still doesn't care. What she didn't know was that the voice she heard far in the distance were soldiers and indigenous people working together. They had been searching for them for 16 days. So these soldiers were using their technology, their helicopter and the night vision goggle to search over top of the jungle. While the indigenous tribe grouped together using prayers and their knowledge of the wildlife to walk over 20 miles every day in hopes of finding something. And then one day they did. They saw something on the ground and it was very colorful, at least comparing it to the brown dirt that they are surrounded by. And as they get closer and closer, they come to realize it is a pink baby bottle. Next to it was a half-eaten apple just a few yards away, and hidden in the distance was a plane in the same terrifying position, surrounded by broken trees. This was a huge breakthrough because now they finally knew where to search next. When you really think about it, to find the crash site also means finding the leftover bodies of Magdalena and the two pilots. And I can't even think about what was going through their heads because on top of all this, they haven't found the keys yet. I mean, the baby bottles and the half-eaten apple are years away, and then there's these footprints leading away from the crash site, but still there's no bodies of the kids anywhere. So that could only mean one thing: they are alive. So this gave those searchers a newfound hope because now they are going even harder, like to this point where they brought in a search dog so that it can get accustomed to their scent and maybe bring them closer. But before a few days, the dog disappeared, and I can't even imagine how infuriating that must be. The dog was supposed to help find them, and instead, it just added to the list of things they needed to find. But the good news is that later, the dog managed to find them on its own. So after weeks of being alone, Leslie and her siblings finally had some furry company, which helped lift their spirits a little. But unfortunately, just a few days later, the dog ran off again and has never been found till this day. Although I would say his paw prints were a really big reason as why researchers were able to get closer and closer to the keys. But the main reason is actually pretty shocking because, like I mentioned earlier, indigenous people are really big in spirituality and believing that the forest and the trees all speak to them in their own language. So one day, a shaman named El Hilo B took ayahuasca, which is basically a natural plant that can make you see and feel things differently and change the way you think also. So for a little while, after performing a spiritual ritual, his vision took him to the children. So he said that his vision were clear as day, and he knew exactly where to find them. So that's the good news. So he went on and told three soldiers, go this direction and only this direction, and they did exactly what he said. They walked for over 50 meters until all of a sudden they stopped and they hear something in the distance. Like they are looking around like, what is that? What is that? It is like squeaky, but not squeaky. So as they keep walking and getting closer and closer to figure out what this is, all of a sudden they see it. It turned out to be 11 months old baby, Christine, crying in Leslie's arm. And right next to them were the two other siblings wrapped in banana leaves to protect them off from the box. So they immediately ran to them saying, it is okay, you are safe now. We are part of the indigenous tribe and we have been looking for you for weeks. Bro, like, I can't believe how resilient these children are. And so finally, on June 9th, after 40 dreadful, dangerous, life-threatening days in the Amazon forest, they were lifted into the air by a helicopter and transferred over to a hospital where they stayed for months until they gained their strength. Okay guys, thank you for staying to the end of the story. Make sure you turn on your notification and subscribe to our channel. I love you guys. Thanks so much.